Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name is Eric Austin, and for today's video, I not only want to talk about how a suit should properly fit, but I specifically want to talk about the reason why a suit should fit the way it does. Now, I won't touch on everything because as a result, this video would be extremely long, but I do want to talk about a few points on both the jacket and trousers, and again, get into the reason behind why both of these items should fit in a specific way. Now, let's start with the jacket, and specifically the shoulder of the jacket. Now, the shoulder of the jacket should hit right on your bone, point to point as we call it. Now, why is this? Well, there are a few reasons. Reason number one, the shoulder is the most important part of the jacket, and this is because the shoulder of the jacket is something that typically cannot be altered post-production. Now, there are definitely a few small tweaks that a master tailor can do to the shoulder, but as a general rule of thumb, it is something that cannot be touched or altered once the garment is made. If the jacket is too large or too small, it can affect other parts of the jacket in what we call influences. So for example, if the jacket is too small, it will oftentimes cause unsightly wrinkling in the back and shoulder region of the jacket, which as a result causes points of stress. On the contrary, if the jacket is too large, it will often, especially if there's any type of padding, cause a dimple to form in the shoulder region. Now, this can also oftentimes make the chest a little bit too large, as well as the sleeves too long, because of course they are attached to the shoulder region of the jacket. Once again, the shoulder should always fit point to point and hit right where your shoulder meets the joint of your arm. Now, I think we've all seen cases where the jacket is both too tight and too small. Neither one of them, quite frankly, looks good. So once again, the shoulder should always fit point to point, because this is something that cannot be altered once the jacket is produced. Next, let's move on to the sleeve length. Now, we can't really talk about the sleeve length of the jacket without also mentioning the sleeve length of the shirt. Now, the jacket should roughly stop around the break of the wrist, and we always want to show about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of shirt cuff peeking from underneath the jacket sleeve. Why is this? Reason number one, now, most people don't know this, but the shirt is actually designed to keep the jacket sleeve from getting dirty. It is much better for any oil and dirt from our hands and wrists to hit the shirt cuff as opposed to the suit jacket, because number one, shirts are actually meant to be replaced, and they're also much less expensive to replace. And also, quite frankly, they're meant to get dirty. It is much easier to clean a shirt than it is to clean a sleeve. Next, let's talk about the length of the jacket. Now, this is something I may or may not get a little bit of pushback on, but the fact of the matter is the jacket should always cover your seat and the crotch line of the trousers. Now, the pushback may come from some older gentlemen who still want to be able to cuff the bottom of the jacket, and to each his own. But once again, the bottom line is that the jacket should always cover your seat and the crotch line of the trousers. Now, let's get into the why behind this. So the reason for this really comes down to proportions. So for example, some gentlemen have longer torsos, some gentlemen have longer legs, but at the end of the day, you always want there to be some type of congruency and even proportion between the length of the jacket and the length of the trousers. Now, you may notice that with some ladies' garments, some ladies' jackets, that sometimes their jackets are a little bit shorter to where their seat is exposed. Again, this is fine if it is a woman's jacket, but for men, going back to proportion as well as honestly etiquette, we always want the jacket to cover everything. If the jacket is too short and your seat or your butt just isn't completely covered, this sometimes, well, pretty much all the time, looks like the jacket is just a little bit too small and quite honestly the wrong size. So once again, the why behind this is going to be proportion as well as etiquette. As a man, if your jacket doesn't completely cover your seat or crotch line, it just quite honestly looks a little bit silly. Next up, we have the collar of the jacket. Now, the collar of the jacket should always sit flush with the collar of the shirt. The reason for this is because, and kind of an old quirky joke that we have, if you can slip a coin between the collar of the jacket and the collar of the shirt, it's too big. Pretty self-explanatory on the reason why. Once again, if the jacket doesn't fit flush on the collar of the shirt, most of the time it's just too big or just quite frankly the wrong size. And also from a visual perspective, it just doesn't look good. And last but certainly not least, on how a jacket should properly fit, I would say this is probably the second most important thing outside of the shoulder, is how the jacket looks when it is buttoned. Now, when a jacket is buttoned, if it fits properly, there should never be any type of tension or pulling on the front or the back of the jacket. One of my mentors used to tell me, if there's an X on your jacket, just like an X on your test growing up when you're in school, that simply means that it's wrong. One thing I like to tell my clients when we're doing a fitting is the jacket should essentially, when it's buttoned, feel like it's hugging you. It should be a bit of a warm embrace. It shouldn't feel like someone's squeezing you. that oftentimes means that it is too tight. One thing that I've been seeing a lot over the last couple of years is gentlemen going with much more of a drape on their jacket, which once again, to each his own, that's certainly fine. But ultimately the jacket should fit in a way to where, again, it's fitted but not tight. You should feel like the jacket's hugging you a little bit on the sides. There should never be any type of X or any type of pulling or on the front or the back of the jacket. And if there is, that simply means the jacket is probably too snug and needs to be let out. Or if buying off the rack, you should simply just go up a size. Next, let's move on to the trousers. Starting from top to bottom, if you will, the waist of the trousers should always fit snug enough to where you don't need to wear a belt. Now, if you do have belt loops, please always wear a belt. But essentially what this means is if you have on trousers, they should be able to fit to where if something happened to your belt or if you forgot your belt, they should be able to stay up without the need of the belt. Now, on all of my own personal suits, as well as most of my clients, I usually end up talking them into it. I have side tab adjusters on all of my trousers, which is essentially like a permanent belt. But once again, the waist of the trousers should fit to where you don't need a belt. Next, once again, working our way down, let's talk about the width of the trouser or the taper of the leg. One rule of thumb, and this is really subjective to each individual, but similar to when we were just talking about the length of the jacket, there is one just general rule across the board, and that is that the trousers should have what we call a pinch of room all the way down. So essentially from the bottom of the seat or top of the thigh, going all the way down, thigh, knee, calf, leg opening, you should be able to essentially pinch and pull the fabric away from the leg. This is a good indication that there's enough room in the trouser and that they're not too tight. Also, if the crease, what we call the perma crease of the trouser, starts to go away, that oftentimes means that at some portion of the leg, it's too tight. Oftentimes you'll see this on the thigh region and sometimes on the calf, giving what we call calf bite. If that crease on the front of the trouser starts to go away, it means that the fabric is being stretched a little bit too much, and as a result, they are just a little bit too tight. And finally, working our way all the way to the bottom of the trouser, something that has been spoken about many, many times. I'm sure you all have heard the term, the break of the trouser. No break, slight break, half break. The break of the trouser, there are a lot of different, you could say, caveats with this. Ultimately, it comes down to context, the type of suit, the type of shoe. But for me, ultimately, I like to make the pants at a length to where they hit right at the top of the shoe. So slight to no break. Now, once again, this depends on if it's a business suit, a casual suit. It depends on the type of shoe. It depends on the individual. I will say the older I get, the more I don't mind a slight break, but ultimately because I wear loafers 99% of the time, I like my trousers to hit just at the top of the shoe and essentially cover my ankle. So once again, staying on theme of this video, just kind of getting into the why behind the length of the trousers or the break of the trousers, a rule of thumb all the way across the board. If you do want to go with a no break, I would say just make sure that they are not too short. There is a difference between a no break and your pants just simply being too short or flooding in layman terms. I think that when you're deciding on the length of the trousers, just keep in mind the type of shoe, keep in mind the type of suit. If this is something for work, if this is something for a wedding, depending on indoors, outdoors, time of day, if this is just a casual suit that you just want to wear on a casual basis, that does dictate the length of the trousers. I would always recommend to make sure that if you do specifically a no break, that they are still long enough to pretty much cover your ankle. Now, all in all, there are quite a few points that we could talk about when it comes to how a suit should properly fit, but as someone that does this every day for a living, these are probably the most common points that I see that gentlemen just have a hard time with, whether that be in person or things that I just see online with social media. If you have any more questions, or if you want me to make a separate video going a little bit more in depth on any of these topics, please let me know down below. Thank you all so much for subscribing and liking and commenting on all of the previous videos. Please make sure you check all of those out as well, especially if you're new here. We are so close once again to 500 subscribers, so please make sure that you are subscribing, and I will see you all next time.